5 months after my wife died, I found out she had been murdered. Not with a knife, not with a gun, with paperwork, capsules, silence. The call came on a Tuesday at 2:17 p.m. I remember because I had just reheated leftover chili and burned the bottom again. I don't cook. I assemble things and hope for the best. "Mr. Carter?" the electrician asked. His voice was cautious, the way people speak when they're not sure if they're about to ruin your day. "We were rewiring the west wall in your wife's workshop. There's something behind the drywall. A metal box. Locked. My wife, Emily, had died 5 months earlier. Official cause: sudden cardiac arrest. She was 58. Too young. But the coroner said these things happen. These things happen. She had converted our detached garage into a woodworking workshop 10 years ago. It smelled like cedar and varnish and the peppermint oil she dabbed on her wrists when she worked. After she passed, I couldn't bring myself to go in there. The dust had settled exactly the way she left it, like time had politely stopped. "Is it yours?" the electrician asked. "I don't know," I said, but I already knew. When I got there, the drywall had been cut into a neat square. The metal box sat between the studs, heavy, industrial, about the size of a shoebox. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't sentimental. It was hidden. The electrician handed me the box like it was a newborn or a bomb. "You want me to open it?" I shook my head. "No. I'll handle it." I drove home with it on the passenger seat, buckled in. I don't know why I buckled it in. Habit, maybe, or respect. Emily was careful. Not paranoid careful. She labeled spice jars with dates. She kept copies of warranties in a binder organized by appliance. She once returned a toaster because it browned unevenly on the left side. If she hid something in a wall, it mattered. I spent 20 minutes staring at the lock before breaking it with a hammer and a screwdriver. Subtlety has never been my strong suit. Inside were 3 things: a USB drive, a black spiral notebook, a sealed envelope with my name written in her handwriting. The sight of that handwriting, slanted, slightly impatient, hit harder than I expected. I had seen it on grocery lists, on birthday cards, on sticky notes that said, "Don't forget to thaw the chicken." Now it was on something that had been buried in a wall. I opened the notebook first. The first page was dated 11 months before she died. Notice discrepancy in joint investment account. $14,230 withdrawal I don't recognize. I frowned. We had a joint investment account with roughly $640,000 in it: retirement savings, index funds, some municipal bonds. Our financial advisor, Martin Hale, had managed it for 8 years. Martin had a firm handshake and the kind of smile that showed only his top teeth. He sent us Christmas cards with photos of his golden retriever. The next page. Another withdrawal. $9,800. No prior discussion. Called Martin. He says rebalancing. Asked for documentation. Then, missing pages in updated investment contract. Pages 4 to 6 replaced. Font slightly different. Why? My stomach tightened. Over the next 20 pages, Emily documented nearly $100,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 7 months. She had written dates, times, screenshots she planned to print, questions she wanted to ask. Then the tone shifted. Health declining, fatigue worsening, episodes of rapid heartbeat especially at night, 110 to 120 BPM while resting. She had underlined that. "I've been taking the cardio support capsules Martin recommended. He said his sister uses them. No label beyond brand name. Need to check ingredients." I sat down at the kitchen table. Martin had recommended supplements? I tried to remember. There had been a dinner at a steakhouse last year. Martin mentioned proactive health and optimizing performance. Emily had laughed and said she preferred vegetables to vitamins. I kept reading. Heart palpitations increasing. Appointment with Dr. Feldman scheduled for April 12th. She never made it to that appointment. 3 pages later, capsule sent to lab for independent testing. Results pending. The handwriting on that line was heavier, pressed harder into the page. And then, "If anything happens to me, This is not random. My hands began to shake. I set the notebook aside and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. 2 pages. She had dated it 3 weeks before she died. Daniel, it began. She hadn't called me Daniel in years. I was Dan. Or, hey you. If you're reading this, something went wrong. I hope I'm just being dramatic and you're laughing at me for hiding a spy kit in the wall. I let out a sound that was almost a laugh. I believe Martin has been siphoning money from our account. I also believe the supplements he encouraged me to take are making me sick. I don't have proof yet. The lab results should confirm whether the capsules contain what the label claims. My throat closed. Please do not confront him directly. If I'm right, he's already shown he's willing to manipulate documents. I don't know how far he'd go to protect himself. She had underlined that sentence twice. Have the remaining capsules tested. Go to the police. And promise me you won't act out of anger. That last line felt personal. Emily knew me. I am not a patient man. I once yelled at a printer for 20 minutes. I once returned a lawn mower because it felt smug. But this wasn't about customer service. I stared at the final paragraph. I love you. If I'm wrong, burn this and tease me forever. If I'm right, be smarter than I was. The USB drive was last. I plugged it into my laptop. Folders labeled bank statements, contracts, emails, audio. The bank statements were scanned PDFs. I compared them to the ones in our online portal. The withdrawals were there, structured, spaced out, always just under $15,000. Not large enough to trigger immediate red flags. The contracts showed 2 versions. The updated one had 3 pages swapped. The signature page was intact, but the fee structure had been altered from 1% annually to performance-based adjustments, which apparently meant whatever he feels like. Then I clicked the audio file. 17 minutes. I almost didn't press play. Her voice filled the kitchen. Calm, steady, controlled. Martin, I sent the capsules for testing. A pause. I think you're overreacting, Emily, he replied, light tone. Too light. I also compared the contract versions. Pages 4 through 6 were replaced. That's standard revision. Without notifying us? Another pause. Then she said, clearly, if the lab finds something in these capsules, I'll be going to the police. And then it happened. For seconds of silence. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not paper shuffling. Not breathing. Nothing. Just empty air. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. I think stress is affecting your judgment. That was the moment. Not the accusation. Not the deflection. The silence. For seconds where he calculated. I sat there long after the recording ended. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Car drove past. The world continued its routine indifference. Emily had known. She had known and she had documented everything. And I had been grieving a natural heart attack. At 6:42 p.m., I called the lab number written in her notebook. They confirmed they had processed a sample under her name. I asked if results had been issued. Yes, the technician said. But we only release to the submitting party. She's dead, I said. There was a pause. I'm sorry for your loss, she replied. You can submit a request with proof of estate authority. Estate authority. Paperwork. Always paperwork. I hung up and looked at the small orange pill bottle still sitting in our bathroom cabinet. I had never thrown it away. I walked to the sink and unscrewed the cap. Inside were 8 capsules. 8. I held one between my fingers. It looked harmless. Beige. Smooth. Innocent. Like something you'd take with a glass of water and a hopeful shrug. I put it back. Then I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. Not Martin. Not yet. Because my wife had asked me not to. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than grief. I felt direction. The first night after finding the box, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with Emily's notebook open, the USB files spread across my laptop screen, and the orange pill bottle in front of me like it was evidence in a low-budget crime show. I half expected dramatic music to swell in the background. Instead, the refrigerator hummed. There was a long silence on the line when I finished. "Mr. Carter," she said finally, "do not speak to your financial advisor. Do not alert him. Bring me copies of everything. Today." Her tone wasn't shocked. It was focused. That helped. By noon, I was in her office downtown, a beige building that smelled like burnt coffee and litigation. I handed her the USB drive, the notebook, the letter. She read quietly. Occasionally, she'd underline something with a pencil. When she reached the part about the capsules being sent for testing, she looked up. "Do you still have them?" "Yes. 8 left." "Good. We'll send them to an independent toxicology lab immediately." Chain of custody documented. Chain of custody. I had been married to a woman who labeled extension cords. Of course she'd think ahead. Laura leaned back in her chair. "If the supplements are contaminated, and if we can tie that to him, this becomes criminal, not just civil. Not just theft. Something heavier." I swallowed. "You think he killed her?" "I think," she said carefully, "we follow the evidence." The next step was accessing the original lab results Emily had received before she died. With Laura's help, I submitted proof that I was executor of her estate. 2 days later, the report arrived. I opened it with hands that felt detached from my body. The capsules contained digitalis glycoside. I didn't know what that meant, so I Googled it. A compound derived from foxglove plants, used in controlled doses to treat heart conditions. In higher doses, toxic. Symptoms included nausea, fatigue, irregular heartbeat,
Rapid heartbeat.
110 to 120 BPM while resting. My chest tightened. I read further. Excessive exposure can cause fatal arrhythmias, often resembling natural cardiac arrest. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Emily hadn't been paranoid. She had been poisoned slowly. Laura didn't dramatize it when I told her. She simply nodded and said, "We call the police." The detective assigned to the case was a man in his early 40s named Ramirez. Broad shoulders, calm eyes. He had the patience of someone who had heard every lie imaginable. He listened to the audio recording twice. When the 4 seconds of silence came, he leaned forward slightly. "Play that again." We did. For seconds. He tapped the table. "That's not confusion. That's calculation." "Exactly." Ramirez requested full financial records. Subpoenas went out. Emails were preserved. The capsules were retested under official forensic conditions. Results matched. Digitalis glycoside, in concentrations far exceeding safe therapeutic levels. Enough to cause cumulative toxicity, the forensic toxicologist explained, especially in someone without a diagnosed heart condition. Emily had been healthy. She walked 3 miles every morning. She complained about her knees, not her heart. The medical examiner reopened her case. Cause of death amended to cardiac arrhythmia consistent with digitalis toxicity. I stared at the updated report. The word natural was gone. Financial analysis took weeks. Ramirez called me in on a Thursday afternoon. "We traced the withdrawals," he said. "Structured, spread across shell accounts, eventually routed to an LLC connected to your advisor.
Martin Hale.
The man who once recommended a Cabernet with our anniversary dinner. The man who told my wife she was overreacting. But it didn't stop there. There's another piece," Ramirez said. He slid a printed email across the table. It was from my brother-in-law, Kevin. Subject line, "Updated balances." Kevin had struggled with gambling for years. Sports betting. Online poker. He once borrowed $12,000 from us to consolidate debt. Emily had insisted we help him. The email contained our account summaries, detailed breakdowns, notes about when we were traveling. My vision blurred slightly. Payments were made to Kevin over the past year, Ramirez continued, from accounts tied to Hale. How much? Approximately $27,000. $27,000. For information. For access. I thought back to Thanksgiving last year. Kevin laughing too loudly at the table. Emily looking tired but smiling. Martin had sent a text that evening about year-end strategy adjustments. Adjustments? I let out a short, humorless laugh. Unbelievable, I muttered. Ramirez didn't disagree. The arrest happened quietly. Martin was taken into custody at his office on a Monday morning. Charges: fraud, theft, and criminal negligence causing death. Kevin was arrested 2 days later as an accessory. I didn't attend the arrest. Laura advised against it. Your strength, she said, is patience now. She was right. The urge to confront Martin, face to face, man to man, burned hot and immediate. I imagined slamming the toxicology report onto his polished desk. I imagined asking him what 4 seconds were worth. But Emily's letter echoed in my mind. Do not confront him directly. So I didn't. Instead, I built the case. Civil suit filed for recovery of stolen funds. Forensic accountants hired. Asset freezes requested. I became meticulous. I created spreadsheets, timelines, cross-referenced emails with bank transfers. I highlighted patterns. It was strange. Grief had made me foggy for months. But now, I was sharp. Purpose does that. One evening, while reviewing documents, I found an email from Martin to Kevin. Keep her calm. She's reading too much into routine fluctuations. Keep her calm. As if she were hysterical. As if her instincts were an inconvenience. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. Emily had known something was wrong. She had written it down instead of dismissing it. And I had been busy replacing a leaking faucet. The guilt hit hard. I went into her workshop for the first time since she died. The air still smelled faintly of cedar. Her tools hung neatly on pegboards. A half-finished rocking chair sat in the corner. She had sanded the left armrest smooth. The right was still rough. I ran my hand over it. I'm doing this your way, I said aloud. No yelling. No threats. Just evidence. The preliminary hearing was tense. Martin appeared thinner. His suit hung slightly loose. He avoided eye contact. Kevin looked worse. Pale. Hollow. When the prosecution played the audio recording in court, the room felt smaller. Emily's voice filled the space again. Calm. Direct. If the lab finds something in these capsules, I'll be going to the police. Then, for seconds, you could hear it in the courtroom too. Silence has weight. Martin shifted in his seat. For the first time since this began, I saw something on his face that wasn't charm or confidence. Fear. But the twist came from an unexpected direction. The defense argued procedural errors in the handling of certain financial documents. Technicalities. Filing dates.
Signature vérification.
Weeks of motions followed. The criminal negligence causing death charge became complicated. Not because the evidence wasn't strong, but because proving intent beyond a reasonable doubt is a high bar. Digitalis is a legitimate medication in controlled doses. They argued he had provided a supplement without knowing its full composition, that he relied on a third-party distributor. Plausible deniability. I hated that phrase. Laura squeezed my arm during one particularly frustrating hearing. Stay steady, she whispered. So I did, because this wasn't about dramatic courtroom speeches. It was about making sure he could never quietly do this again, and ensuring that every document, every transaction, every capsule was accounted for. The revenge wasn't loud. It was methodical. The plan was never to destroy him. It was to expose him. There's a difference. Destruction is loud, emotional, satisfying for about 12 seconds. Exposure is slow, clinical,
Permanent.
Laura explained it to me over coffee one gray morning. If the homicide-related charge collapses on procedural grounds, she said, stirring her cup, we make sure the financial crimes stick. Those are cleaner. Paper trails don't get emotional. I nodded. Paper trails don't cry at funerals either. The prosecution's case tightened around the fraud first. Forensic accountants testified that nearly $98,400 had been siphoned from our joint investment account over 8 months. Structured withdrawals. Always below internal compliance flags. Routed through 2 intermediary accounts before landing in an LLC Martin controlled. They showed a chart of transactions on a projector screen. Dates, amounts, transfers. It looked almost elegant, like the altered fee language. The jury leaned forward when they saw the comparison side by side. Emily had circled the differences in red ink. Even in death, she was prepared. The more difficult battle was the criminal negligence causing death charge. The toxicology was clear. Digitalis glycoside at toxic levels. But the defense pushed hard on intent. Where did Mr. Hale obtain these supplements? The defense attorney asked during cross-examination. A third-party distributor, Ramirez answered. Is there proof he knew the capsules contained digitalis? Silence. There it was again. Silence. But this time it wasn't 4 seconds. It was a legal gap. No email explicitly stating, I am poisoning my client.
No invoice label toxins.
Just recommendation. Just pressure. Just the coincidence that my wife's symptoms aligned perfectly with digitalis toxicity. The defense suggested Emily might have misused the capsules. Taken more than recommended. I almost stood up. Emily once measured coffee grounds with a scale. She did not accidentally overdose. Laura gripped my sleeve before I could embarrass myself. Patience, she whispered. The unexpected twist came from Kevin. 3 weeks before trial resumed, his attorney approached the prosecution. Kevin was willing to testify, in exchange for a reduced charge. When I heard that, I felt something ugly twist in my chest. He had betrayed us once for money. Now he would betray Martin to save himself. I suppose loyalty has a price tag in some circles. Kevin took the stand on a Monday morning. He looked smaller than I remembered. He admitted he had provided Martin with our account updates. He admitted receiving payments totaling $27,000 over the course of a year. Did Mr. Hale ever discuss Emily Carter's health with you? The prosecutor asked. Kevin swallowed. Yes. The courtroom shifted. What did he say? He said, she was getting suspicious, that she was stressed. That stress can cause heart problems. My jaw tightened. Did he ever mention the supplements? Kevin hesitated. Yes. A murmur rippled through the room. He said they would help her relax. Stabilize things. Stabilize what? Kevin stared at his hands. The situation. The situation. My wife's life reduced to a situation. Kevin also testified that Martin seemed nervous when Emily mentioned lab testing. How did you know he was nervous? The prosecutor asked. He called me right after. Said if she kept digging, things could get messy. That phrase echoed in my head for days. Get messy. As if we were talking about spilled wine. Despite Kevin's testimony, the defense attacked his credibility relentlessly. Isn't it true you were facing significant gambling debts? They asked. Yes. Isn't it true you're testifying to reduce your own sentence? Yes. The jury watched him carefully. Desperation doesn't make someone honest. But it doesn't automatically make them liars either. In the end, the judge ruled that while there was strong circumstantial evidence linking the toxic supplements to Martin's recommendation, procedural issues around the chain of original distribution created reasonable doubt regarding direct intent to cause death. The criminal negligence causing death charge was suspended. Suspended. Not dismissed outright. But not convicted either. I felt like someone had let the air out of my lungs. Laura leaned toward me. It's not over. And she was right. Because fraud doesn't require proving motive to kill. It requires proving theft. And that part was airtight. 2 months later, the verdict came down. Martin Hale was convicted of fraud and financial theft. He was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. His license permanently revoked. His assets partially seized. Kevin pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. 18 months, most of it suspended. Mandatory restitution. When the judge read the sentence, Martin didn't look at me. Not once. That bothered me more than I expected. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted him to understand exactly who had dismantled him. But maybe that was my ego talking. Emily wouldn't have cared about eye contact. She would have cared about the record.
Permanent.
Documented. On paper. The civil suit concluded 6 months later. Through asset liquidation and insurance claims, we recovered approximately $82,000 of the stolen funds. Not all of it, but enough to matter. Laura called me the day the final transfer cleared. "It's done," she said. I hung up and sat in the quiet house. The house that still felt too big for one person. The house where a metal box had once been hidden in a wall. I walked back into the workshop that evening. The rocking chair still waited. I sanded the right armrest until it matched the left. Slow, steady strokes. When it was finished, I sat in it for the first time. Creaked slightly under my weight. "Good job," I muttered, half to myself, half to her. Cold revenge doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like balance restored. But there was still something left to settle inside me. Because winning in court doesn't automatically quiet the questions that show up at 2 a.m. And those were coming. People imagine revenge feels hot. It doesn't. Feels quiet. The day after sentencing, I woke up at 5:43 a.m. out of habit. Emily used to get up at 5:30 for her morning walks. For a second, just 1 second, I forgot she was gone. I almost reached across the bed. Then reality returned like a dull ache in the ribs. Martin was in prison. Kevin was on probation. The court documents were final. The money, most of it, was back in our account. And yet the house was still silent. Justice does not make coffee. The newspapers ran a short article. Financial advisor convicted of fraud. Client death raises questions. They mentioned the toxicology findings, but carefully.
No dramatic headlines.
No murder label. Legal language is sterile like that. Alleged. Circumstantial. Procedural complications. Emily deserved more than footnotes. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about public spectacle. It was about record. Official acknowledgement that something had been wrong. And that she had been right. Kevin came to see me 3 weeks after the sentencing. I almost didn't open the door. He stood on the porch looking 10 years older than he had at Thanksgiving. His shoulders slumped. His eyes avoided mine. "I'm sorry," he said. 2 words. They floated between us like something fragile. I didn't invite him in. "You knew she was sick," I said. He nodded. "I didn't think." "That's the problem," I interrupted. "You didn't think." He swallowed. "I needed the money. I thought he was just moving things around. I didn't think it would hurt her." There it was again. Didn't think. I studied his face for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was shame and fear. "I can't forgive you today," I said. "Maybe someday, but not today." He nodded like he had expected that. As he walked back to his car, I felt something surprising. Not rage, just exhaustion. The civil recovery process wrapped up in early spring. Laura called to confirm the final asset transfer had cleared. "After fees and liquidation, you recovered approximately $82,000, she said. "It's not everything, but it's substantial." I thanked her. When I hung up, I opened the online banking portal. The balance sat there, stable, quiet. For months, that number had felt like evidence of violation. Now it felt a neutral. Money is strange. Can represent security, betrayal, freedom, greed, all at once. Emily had once told me, "Money doesn't change people. It reveals them." I think she was right. Martin had revealed himself. Kevin had revealed himself. And, unexpectedly, so had I. There were nights when anger still surged up unexpectedly. Like when I found one of Emily's scarves in the coat closet and smelled her perfume. Lavender and something citrus I could never name. Or when I drove past the steakhouse where Martin once toasted to long-term partnerships. On those nights, I'd replay the audio recording in my mind. For seconds of silence. I used to think that silence was his guilt. Now I think it was calculation. He had weighed risk versus reward in that gap. Nearly $100,000 siphoned. A client getting suspicious. A supplement that could plausibly be dismissed as alternative wellness. He had bet on probability. He had assumed she would either stay quiet or be dismissed. He underestimated her. And eventually me. I started seeing a therapist around that time. Not because anyone told me to. Because I realized something uncomfortable. For months, my life had been driven by pursuit. evidence, court dates, strategy. Now there was space again. Empty space can be dangerous if you don't fill it intentionally. During one session, the therapist asked, "What would Emily want your life to look like now?" I laughed softly. "Organized." She smiled. "Beyond that." I thought about it. Emily loved small projects, tangible progress, fixing what could be fixed. So I reopened her workshop fully. I finished the rocking chair. Then I built a small bookshelf. Nothing fancy, slightly uneven edges. Sniffing. I like to think she would have pretended not to notice. Working with wood grounded me. It reminded me that not everything hidden in walls is poison. Sometimes it's just wiring. One afternoon, about a year after her death, I visited the cemetery alone. I brought the amended death certificate. I know that sounds strange. I sat on the grass and read it aloud. Cause of death: cardiac arrhythmia consistent with digitalis toxicity. The words felt clinical, detached, but they were honest. "I did it your way," I said quietly.
No confrontation. No shouting.
Just proof. The wind moved lightly through the trees. For a moment, I imagined her rolling her eyes at the drama of me bringing paperwork to a grave. "You always did love documentation," I muttered, and I laughed. Grief doesn't disappear after justice. It just changes shape. People sometimes ask if I feel satisfied. That's not the right word. Satisfied implies pleasure. I feel settled. There's a difference between revenge and restoration. Revenge says, "I want you to hurt because I hurt." Restoration says, "I want the truth on record." Martin will serve his sentence. He will live with a permanent conviction. His professional reputation gone. His golden retriever Christmas cards probably discontinued. Kevin will spend years rebuilding trust if he can. And me? I wake up at 5:43 a.m. most days. I make coffee. I sit in the rocking chair we finished together, well, that she mostly finished, and I watch the sun come up through the kitchen window. The house is still quiet, but it's no longer haunted by questions. Only memories. There's one more thing I learned from all of this. Suspicion isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's protection. Emily didn't ignore the uneasy feeling in her chest, physical or financial. She wrote it down. She gathered proof. She acted strategically. She didn't scream. She documented. And in the end, that discipline mattered more than outrage ever could. It's been 2 years now. 2 years since the electrician cut into a wall and found a metal box that changed the story of my marriage. If you had told me back then that grief would eventually feel less like drowning and more like carrying a heavy backpack, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's the best description I have. It never fully comes off. You just get stronger. I still keep the notebook. It sits in my desk drawer, wrapped in a manila folder labeled, in my handwriting, Emily Documentation. She would appreciate the labeling. Sometimes I reread the first page. Noticed discrepancy. Such a calm way to begin unraveling a crime. No drama.
No accusation.
Just observation. That's the thing I admire most now. She didn't jump to conclusions. She gathered facts. When something felt wrong, she didn't suppress it for the sake of politeness. She wrote it down. There's power in that. I've changed in small, practical ways. I review financial statements monthly now. Line by line. Not obsessively, but attentively. I ask questions when something doesn't make sense. I don't accept vague explanations dressed up in confidence. Blind trust feels different to me now. It used to feel like loyalty. Now I understand it can sometimes be avoidance. There's a difference between trust and delegation. Trust is informed. Delegation without oversight is abdication. Emily trusted, but she verified. I delegated and assumed. That assumption almost cost everything. I've also learned something uncomfortable about anger. At first, I wanted Martin to suffer the way I had suffered. I imagined him alone in a cell replaying his choices. But over time, that image lost its intensity. Not because I forgave him, but because my life couldn't revolve around his punishment forever. The best revenge, I've realized, isn't obsession. It's stability. It's waking up without your first thought being the person who wronged you. It's building something steady in the space they tried to destabilize. Cold revenge isn't theatrical. It's administrative. It's filing the right documents. It's preserving evidence. It's letting the legal system grind forward while you resist the urge to explode. It's patience when fury would be easier. Kevin and I speak occasionally now. Carefully. There are conversations we'll probably never have in full. But he's in recovery. He attends meetings. He repaid a portion of what he owed as part of his agreement. Trust isn't restored because someone says sorry. It's rebuilt in increments, like sanding down a rough armrest. One pass at a time. Some days it still feels unfinished. And maybe it always will. I sometimes think about the 4 seconds of silence in that recording. For a long time they haunted me. Now they teach me something. Silence reveals character. What someone does in a pause when confronted with truth tells you more than their prepared speech ever could. Martin paused and calculated. Emily paused and documented. I paused and eventually acted. That's the only part one control. My pause. My response. Last month, I donated part of the recovered money to a local legal aid clinic that helps elderly clients review financial contracts. Felt right. If even one person asks an extra question because of that funding, then Emily's caution lives on in someone else's protection. I didn't put her name on a plaque. She wouldn't have liked that. But I know. And that's enough. Sometimes people ask what I would have done differently if I could go back. I think about that carefully. Would I have confronted Martin earlier? Would I have insisted Emily stop the supplements sooner? Maybe. But hindsight is always brave. The truth is, manipulation works because it's gradual. Because it looks like professionalism. Because it sounds like reassurance. And because we want to believe the people we've trusted for years wouldn't harm us. That desire isn't foolish. It's human. The mistake is ignoring the moment when instinct whispers that something is off. Emily didn't ignore it. She followed it to a metal box in a wall. She left breadcrumbs of truth for me to find. And I followed them. The workshop is my favorite room now. The rocking chair sits near the window. The bookshelf holds manuals and old novels. There's a faint smell of cedar that never quite fades. Some mornings, I sit there with coffee and watch the light shift across the floorboards. I think about how close everything came to being buried as natural causes. How easily a manipulated narrative can settle into official history. If not for a notebook. If not for 8 capsules left in a bottle. If not for a letter that said, "Be smarter than I was." I don't feel like I was smarter. I feel like I listened. And that made all the difference. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not about revenge. It's about attention. Pay attention to the numbers. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to the slight change in tone when someone is cornered. And most of all, pay attention to the quiet discomfort you're tempted to dismiss because confrontation feels inconvenient. That discomfort might be the beginning of clarity. I still miss her every day. Justice didn't bring her back. But it did something else. It restored truth. And truth, even when it arrives through a broken lock and a hidden box, is the foundation you rebuild on. I wake up at 5:43 a.m. I make coffee. I sit in the rocking chair. And I live. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But deliberately. That, I think, is the final form of revenge. And the beginning of peace.